You are doubtlessly aware of the issue facing world authorities at the moment that has, like everything else in our twisted and fallen world, been politicized to the point of nausea, with the dangers of it either overblown or downplayed, depending on who you listen to. I have a story related to that issue, but as you shouldn't be surprised about by now, I have to tread extremely carefully with how I talk about it. If you don't know what I'm referring to, we'll call it the beer bug. If you still don't get what that is, ask in the comments, or I or someone else will clarify it for you there. Often, my clever use of language isn't all that clever, and I often need the help of members of the audience who are far smarter and more clever than I am. Anyway, the story of the beer bug is important for the church today, not because Francis fell ill and was thought to have contracted it, though the Vatican later said he had a cold, and I'll take their word for it. Rather, because the beer bug and its consequences have been a disaster for Europe, causing the delay of numerous public events. Today we have the news that a Vatican event had been added to the list, the Global Education Pact. So let's go over this story and catch up on the Global Education Pact and its goals that sound like they came straight out of the Italian Lodge. The announcement that the Global Education Pact conference was being delayed came late on Wednesday. It was not a surprise to anyone paying attention to the condition Italy is in at the moment. While the situation with Greece and Turkey hasn't been factored in either, at least publicly, the Vatican is surely aware that the Europeans are closer to a state of war now than they have been in quite some time, and that should factor into these kinds of decisions, even if they don't acknowledge them publicly. But the Vatican announcement is short, and I present it here for you to hear for yourself, since you probably didn't read it. Remember, when I said a couple of minutes ago about the, beer bug, quote, press release from the Congregation for Catholic Education on the Global Compact on Education. The Global Compact on Education, promoted by Pope Francis to revive commitment to and with the younger generations, will take place from the 11th to 18 October 2020. The pact will be signed on October 15th. The event, entrusted to the Congregation for Catholic Education, was to take place this coming 14th of May, with a series of complementary events between 10th to 17th of May, such as the Village of Education, with the best international educational experiences, illustrated by young students from all over the world. The uncertainty linked to the spread of the beer bug, as I call it, along with the decisions taken by public authorities on a global scale, have led to the decision to postpone the anticipated meeting in order to allow the widest and most serene participation possible. The Global Pact is not limited to educational and academic institutions, but rather, in the belief that commitment to education must be shared by all, involves representatives of religions, international bodies, and the various humanitarian institutions of the academic, economic, political, and cultural world. From this perspective, it can be understood that the broader and more varied participation desired by Pope Francis is not an additional dimension to the Global Pact on Education, but rather constitutes at the same time the premise and purpose of such an alliance. The Congregation for Catholic Education continues to work for this fundamental meeting, in accordance with the intentions of Pope Francis. Quote, let us seek solutions together, boldly undertake processes of change, and look to the future with hope. I invite everyone to work for this alliance and to be committed, individually and within our communities, to nurture the dream of a humanism rooted in solidarity and responsive both to humanity's aspirations and to God's plan. End quote. From the message for the launch of the Global Compact on Education. Okay then, so we have a delay in the Vatican conference that will take place with global population control advocates and religious leaders in a sort of weird ecumenical dialogue. I'm fine with this, to be honest, though now they've moved the conference from being symbolically linked to the Feast of Our Lady of Fatima to coincide now with the 103rd anniversary of the Miracle of the Sun at Fatima. Maybe I'm reading too much into this, since I don't think these dates come to mind for the kind of people who think that they can open a dialogue with the maniacs who want to limit the number of children most people can have, or who demonstrate through their actions that other religions are on equal footing with others and should be in some sort of constructive dialogue with them. Still, this is a rather strange but predictable development, given the state of things in Italy. Let's pray that this conference gets delayed further without anyone getting harmed as a consequence. If you're not familiar with the Global Education Pact, Francis launched the initiative last September when the Amazon Synod was about to start, saying that a Global Education Pact is needed to educate us in universal solidarity and a new humanism. While solidarity is a key component of Catholic social teaching, I'm not sure what universal solidarity is. But I've reported before on the new humanism of Francis, and frankly I'm not a fan, to put it mildly. The core component of the conference was to be, according to Francis, about care for the common home, that is, environmentalism and climate change. Here's a quote from the Vatican's official media arm, Vatican News, on this from last September. Quote, "Never before has there been such need to unite our efforts in a broad educational alliance, to form mature individuals capable of overcoming division and antagonism, and to restore the fabric of relationships for the sake of a more fraternal humanity," Francis said, quoting an African proverb. "It takes a whole village to educate a child." Pope Francis called for the creation of an educational village. In such a system, he said, everyone would participate according to their respective roles to form a network of open human relationships. The Pope called it an alliance that integrates and respects all aspects of the person, uniting studies and everyday life, teachers, students, and their families, and civil society in its intellectual, scientific, artistic, athletic, political, business, and charitable dimensions. And he laid out several steps towards creating this educating village. Pope Francis has described his vision for the global event as the creation of an educational village to face new challenges with the human person at the center, investing creatively and responsibly in long-term projects that train individuals willing to offer themselves in service to the community. End quote. So it takes a village. Where have we heard that before? The use of the environment and any environmental crisis that might be going on has been the main thrust of the population control advocates for at least 50 years. I go into their greater machinations in my video from a week or so ago about Jeffrey Sachs, who is the main mind from the United Nations that has been seen frequently at these Vatican events in recent years. He praised Francis's encyclical Laudato Si numerous times, and that makes sense because he helped craft the thing in 2015. Here he is in 2018 in an interview with Crux magazine, saying, quote, Laudato Si, is magnificent, absolutely magnificent. You read it and it's breathtaking. I often say that I can assign it to first-year graduate students in earth sciences, biology, theology, diplomacy, or political science. It's so compellingly holistic that it can be read from all these crucial points of view. So therefore it inspires in its profundity and speaks to our urgent needs in a very direct way. The language is also very clear, and I think it brings the full emotional response to all of the knowledge that is deeply interwoven in the document. End quote. Well, I'm a political scientist, and you can definitely read it through that lens, but if you're a Catholic and a political scientist like I am, it should be an alarming document to read. But this isn't the first time Sachs has been involved in writing papal documents either. 25 years prior, he assisted John Paul II in writing his landmark encyclical, Centenimus Annus, which celebrated the 100th anniversary of Pope Leo XIII's encyclical Rerum Novarum. And the fingerprints of neoliberalism are all over that document as well. Why the Vatican keeps hiring global population control advocates for assistance is beyond my understanding, but it does set off alarm bells whenever Sachs and people like him are present in church activity. Last October, Francis gave us an idea about what he meant by the new humanism in his message to the meeting of the European bishops held at that time. He contrasted it with the rise of populism and related politics across the Western world. Quote, the forms of populism that are spreading these days are nourished by the constant search for contrasts. They do not open the heart, but rather imprison it within walls of suffocating resentment, Pope Francis said. We encourage the people of God to work for a new European humanism capable of dialogue, integration, and generation. At the same time, we encourage everyone to value what is dearest to the continent's tradition, defense of human life and dignity, promotion of the family, and respect for the fundamental rights of the person. End quote. Again, this sounds like a spiritualization of the EU's program that the Greeks are now dealing with the consequences of. Notice no mention of the resentment that has come as a consequence of these policies. But I digress. The new humanism seems to be looking to unite human beings in common bonds and integrating them into one holistic unit of some kind. The ecumenical angle of this new humanism cannot be ignored. A couple of weeks ago, LifeSite interviewed Archbishop Zanni, who described it in terms more in keeping with deism than with the Catholic faith. In that interview, he said this of Francis's new humanism and ecumenical dialogue, quote, with the heads of religion, there will be a special moment for them in the Sistine Chapel on May 13th, with an artistic and cultural event that intends to reflect on Michelangelo's depiction of creation, in which we see the finger of God encounters the finger of man, but they do not touch. In this depiction of the creation, we see God who gives man strength, liberty, and life, but leaves him free. It is an encounter of freedom, where there is a presence of God that does not crush man, but frees him. He launches him in his responsibility. Here we have two very important concepts. The Christian idea is that of creation, and it is not only Christian. The idea belongs to the three monotheistic religions. Therefore, that is the very important root. The rest comes from it. It's the centrality of the person. God creates, but then withdraws. He leaves man saying, "Go!" End quote. Again, this has been moved from May to October. But note that date. The ecumenical meeting was set to take place in Rome at the Vatican on the Feast of Our Lady of Fatima, which I found to be spooky timing. And if they put it on that date, I'll let you figure it out. I think if I said what comes to mind, I'd probably have to go to confession. I'll say this much, though. For me, the issues facing Europe right now and the Americans and other countries was really revealed to me as the satanic schemes they are when wrapped up in humanitarian language, when I read the Tower of Babel account in the Old Testament. It sounds exactly like the EU and UN program that is frankly straight out of the Lodge, with their promotion of human integration and fraternity and the like. Go read it for yourself, and see if you understand what I mean by that. It's breathtaking once you notice it, and I didn't go looking for it when I saw it. But anyway, for now it seems that the meeting in Rome has been delayed due to the crisis unfolding across the globe. While that is a good thing, frankly, there are other ways of achieving Francis's environmental goals without involving the likes of Jeff Sachs and the United Nations. I do think that environmentalism is only part of the real issue, with the rest being power and influence. Keep an eye on this story, folks, because it's not going to go away unless the beer bug crisis continues. But let me know what you think about this story in the comments. This is, in my mind, the real agenda of this pontificate, to consolidate power through a relationship with the UN and the EU. I'll take Francis's concerns about the environment and the impact of climate change, as he sees it, on the poor at face value as his motivating factors, but make no mistake, this is the real driving force for the pontificate. It's not a coincidence that Francis's first solo encyclical was Laudato Si, which he constantly references, while the first official encyclical of the pontificate, Lumen Fide, was mostly written under Benedict XVI, and is all but forgotten now. But again, let me know your thoughts on this in the comments. And thanks for your support of this channel, and if you like what you see, subscribe, share the video, consider joining us to keep the work going, and please, most importantly, pray for the church and for those who have been impacted by the big crisis going on right now that I can't really mention. Thanks for listening. I'm Anthony Stine. Ave Maria.